Welcome back, everybody, to the Omniverse Comics Guide podcast. We are your hosts. He's Dave. I'm Eric.
You are.
There I am. Woo! uh, everybody, welcome back to the show. This week, we are doing the top 10 John Byrne creator spotlight. But before we get into our respective lists, don't forget to subscribe, follow, share if you're watching on Twitch, on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever platform you prefer. Share it. That's the best thing you could do, especially if it was a fun episode or there was something you liked about it that would help other people who are trying to get into comic books. So, omniversecomics.guide.
Yeah.
That's the place to go for everything. I can't forget to mention omniversecomics.guide.
I forget every week.
First and foremost. So, without further ado, Dave, top 10 John Byrne. This, for guys who have collections like we do, this should have been easy for us because I'm sure we own a lot of things John Byrne related. Take it away.
Okay, deal. So I'm going to open with a bit of an obvious one. But this, I think this is where this list is going to be kind of interesting because he's done so much stuff. And some of it he's written, some of it he's drawn, most of it he's done both. But it could be anything in there. And it's decades worth of material.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
But there's some things that appear on lists very frequently. This is one of them. John Byrne drew it. I believe it was written by Roger Stern. Our friend Roger Stern. Oh, no. Captain America, right?
Good pick. Yeah, Captain America. Good pick.
So, Captain America 253 to 254, which is... and it's when Captain America goes to England, teams up with Union Jack, and faces the Nazi criminal... Baron Blood, the vampire Nazi. I mean, like, you think like Nazis can't get more evil. Make him a vampire. Sorted. And it's how Cap handles this situation in the storyline. And the way Byrne draws it, it really amplifies like what he's going through, I think, when he has to make some tough calls. So it's a great story. It's very difficult to talk about as it's a two-parter. So you don't want to say too much because it's quite short. But it's a great storyline.
Yeah. Nice pick.
Thank you.
That's a great pick.
Okay. Cheers.
Yeah, it was on my list, so.
All right. I had a feeling I was feeling mean, but I thought like I kind of want to open with something that pure classic. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go anywhere very deep right now with my pick. I'm gonna pick a Fantastic Four story. This is one of my gaps in my John Byrne reading because I have the whole series now. And I've been waiting for volume 2 to be back in print to, sit and read it all properly. I'm halfway through the first Omni, and I've done that twice where I've read half of Fantastic Four, the Byrne stuff, and then I didn't continue.
Right.
I don't know why. Not because it wasn't good. It was just like, I'll take a break. I've read, 600 pages. I'll come back to this. Fantastic Four, 236. It's a anniversary issue. I feel it's a great place for anybody to start with the Fantastic Four because I think John Byrne had said the premise for this was if Fantastic Four was going to be turned into a movie, what would he make?
Right.
And so this was the comic that he felt like you could turn this into a Fantastic Four movie.
Really?
I think he may have said that at a Fan Expo Canada. Yeah, this issue is a lot of fun. I think it's a great starting point for someone who's not really familiar with the Fantastic Four because I'll admit when I started to read I read it off the strength of it being like John Byrne's best work. If you think his X-Men is good, his Fantastic Four is where it's really at. And so I gave this a shot, and admittedly, I feel he nails that issue. Like it's pretty much a pitch perfect issue as like a comic book story.
Yeah.
From beginning to end, gives you the arc, all the information you need to know, who the villains are, a problem that they got to get out of. Like right to the very end of the story, you're pretty invested. So yeah, it's an easy one to pick up for a first time reader, I think.
Is that the Liddleville story? I don't want to give too much away.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you've read that whole run and you're pretty fond of it, I know.
Yeah.
Like you've said.
I could have done a top 5 Fantastic Four by Byrne. Easily.
That's what I've never heard anyone say it sucks. Never. They're like Jack and Stan, Byrne.
Yeah.
like when it comes to Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
I'm like,
easily.
okay.
There's a little cheese here and there, but there's nothing wrong with a little bit of cheese here and there. Well, within reason.
Within reason.
Doing it
Yeah,
in some
no, it's
places.
just right. You could take it away. You're number 2.
My number 2 is Fantastic Four.
Surprise.
Surprise,
No way.
well, flippers. So, I read it as a kid. So this was a big deal for me when I was a kid, and it really upset me. It's Fantastic Four 285. It's a Secret Wars 2 tie-in. But the way that he uses the Beyonder in that story is not the way the Beyonder's really used anywhere else. So it's really odd. It's difficult to explain. So basically, there's a kid who's a massive fan of the Human Torch. He will do anything to be or to meet the Human Torch. And something happens, and it's about the impact of that on the life of the Human Torch, who still was the perennial teenager, even like though the character had been around for 20 plus years at that point, 25 years. But he still never seemed to grow up. And Byrne did a lot in that run. There are storylines that really move these characters forward. So whether it's the Thing leaving the team, Sue going from Invisible Girl to Invisible Woman, Reed doesn't really change that much. I guess he meets his father in the Byrne run. I think that's the first time he meets him, actually. And then, of course, growing Franklin as a character, and then Johnny Storm kind of grows up. This was during this run. He grows up in a number of different ways. This is one of those moments. I cried as a kid, like reading this comic, and I felt really weird because I wasn't affected by things much as a kid. I was quite emotionless robot, unless it was if a monkey died in a film. That would upset me.
Yeah.
There was this storyline kind of got to me, and I read it about, I don't know, 20 years ago, and went, you ridiculous wuss. What were you thinking? And then I read it again about 5 or so years ago, I think. Well, it was when I did the Secret Wars 2 reading order. I reread that issue and went like, no, this is. I could see why this was impactful, and I think it is one of those ones that people refer to quite a lot. It's such an unusual issue. It's not necessarily a villain of the month issue, so it catches you off guard. I still think it's quite a powerful issue, even if it is a little on the cheesy side, and you kind of know what's coming to a degree. But I really like it. It's one of those big highlights in Byrne's run.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Fantastic Four 285. I don't want to say anything more about it because obviously they're like yourself. There are people who haven't read it yet. So get out there and give it a go. I do think the strongest stuff is the second half.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about this earlier, and I think he meets his stride more in the second half because Byrne has a habit of jumping on a book, paying tribute, and then going, right, now I'm going to shake it up and move the character forward. And a lot of creators do that, but he does it a lot. So, and this is one of those things like Fantastic Four, there's a lot of paying tribute, and then by the second omnibus, if you're doing it in that form, it's very much the other half. It's a very different take.
Yeah, it's interesting some of the things, even with the Fantastic Four, that they famously did within their family dynamic and relationship. It's just like, wow, I can't believe you went there with that. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Good pick. My number 2, shall we proceed?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this would be my hidden gem for a top John Byrne pick, and it's with his one of his more famous collaborators, of course, Chris Claremont.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what you may think. Iron Fist. Marvel Premiere 25, Iron Fist 1-15, and Marvel Team Up 63-64. It's early Claremont, early Byrne, really cutting their teeth. You can see that he's not fully formed into his style yet, but it's like, man, Byrne doing ninja and kung fu and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun because you get cameos from different characters throughout the universe because he's a brand new character at this time. We know him now for nearly 40 years plus, right?
Yeah.
But this is him as a brand new character, really trying to, and so it makes sense that you got these kind of newcomers working on this book that is no one's really invested in just yet, but it's kind of the hot thing in the 70s is kung fu flicks.
Yes.
And Iron Fist and Shang-Chi, right? It was a pretty big thing at Marvel at the time. It had its own little subgenre.
Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, like in the magazine format. And
just a shout out to Omega Bread. He says that the debut of Sabretooth happens in that run. So I think he is correct. It's actually on the back cover of the Epic. I don't know if I
That's the
showed
thing.
that.
The last two issues, I think it's the last two, so he's absolutely right. The first appearance of Sabretooth is in one, and then the final issue, Iron Fist goes up against the X-Men, and the costume that Wolverine is wearing is from their adventure in space with the Shi'ar. And that used to belong to Fang of the Imperial Guard, and what they were planning to do was keep Wolverine in that costume, but it's terrible. Like, why would you?
I gotta look at it now.
It's a really bad costume, and it comes out again years later, when he gives it to what was her name? It was in a Marvel Comics Presents story, and it wasn't a bad one because some of the Wolverine Marvel Comics Presents stuff was. But what was her name?
The costume,
the native or something. That's the one. Yeah, so that belonged to Fang from the Imperial Guard.
Okay. That's right, and that's.
So everyone's just having a little chin wag in the chat. It's quite sweet.
There you go.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Bread says as well the costume is an homage to Timberwolf from the Legion of Superheroes, because, of course, the Imperial Guard were based on the Legion of Superheroes, with Gladiator being based on Superman. So that's a good point. There we go. Nice, man. Thank you. That's what the chat's for.
So the Fury of Iron Fist Epic Collection. It's Claremont and Byrne pretty much are the stars of it. Even the stuff that they have in Marvel Team Up, like I said, are collected with Iron Fist and Spider-Man. It's a fun book.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
It is.
Time travel to the 70s, get into the Kung Fu, and it's just Danny Rand going through a gauntlet for a lot of that book, escaping ninjas and traps, and it's cool. It's really cool. Dave, you're number 3.
Okay, we mentioned Marvel Team Up just now, so I'm going to jump this ahead. The 70s are great for Claremont and Byrne, by the looks of it, with X-Men, Iron Fist, and also Marvel Team Up. Those guys were busy. I don't know how Byrne drew this much, and with the level of detail as well that you didn't see in a lot of artists at the time. When he was working with Claremont again on Marvel Team Up, but then there was a gap. I think some other people did some issues, but they came back and did I think they did a 2-issue arc at one point, and then they came back and did one more single issue arc as a duo one there. And it's a bit of a randomer, but it's Marvel Team Up number 79, Spider-Man and Red Sonja. This is a really weird story, and it does actually relate to later X-Men stories, of all things. So there's an amulet that a security guard touches, and he ends up being possessed by Kulan Gath, who's a Conan character, a Conan villain, like an ancient sorcerer. And while Spider-Man's fighting this guy, as he's trying to kind of reincorporate himself into the present, I think it's been a long time since I've read it, so bear with me. Trying to reincorporate himself in the present day, Mary Jane Watson touches a sword in this museum that they're fighting in, and she's kind of possessed to a degree by the spirit of the long dead Red Sonja. So then Spider-Man and Red Sonja, not being able to speak the same language though, so yeah, well done. Learn from that, Time Bandits. She joins the fight, and they're both fighting Kulan Gath. So it's just a one-off story as well, and it's a bizarre one. The art in it though the detail is amazing. The layouts are amazing. You can see the influence of all sorts in there, including like Neil Adams, but it's just so good. And it's like there's a lot of meat in that story in terms of the Claremont script. I think it was co-written by them, and Terry Austin's on inks. So I mean, Byrne, Austin, Claremont.
That's the dream team.
That is the dream team. That's when you know you're getting gold. And it's Spider-Man and Red Sonja. I mean, like, just get it, have fun. You can get this story. It's quite hard to track down in collected editions because obviously Marvel don't own the rights anymore to Red Sonja. There was a later miniseries, a 5-issue Spider-Man Red Sonja miniseries, which was released by Marvel and Dynamite together. And that does address some of the storyline stuff that's in continuity that happens in this story from years earlier. So they team up again, and it references back. But also, the amulet stuff gets picked up again years later in the Kulan Gath storyline that's in Uncanny X-Men, when this amulet gets dredged out of Hudson Bay or something like that. So it all still comes back, and this is another thing with Byrne. He loves his continuity stuff, whether he's fixing it or he's delving into it. He loves it.
Right.
So even a one-off story like this, that a lot of the time people are going to just forget, which is a shame, it does feed into later stories.
And that was the special thing about comics of that generation, is that it could be 1-2 issues that will forever change an entire universe if the story's good enough. Did you ever happen to read? Did you ever happen to read John Byrne's Superman when Big Barda comes into his life?
Now that came up in the chat, and I kind of remember. I'd forgotten about that issue, and then when Omega Bread mentioned it, I was just like, "How did I not think of that one?" I love Big Barda. I love Big Barda. Like, she's one of my favorite characters.
Me too. Yeah. But as a kid, that was one of my first comic books ever.
Yeah.
I couldn't read it, but I knew it was naughty. It was naughty enough. And when I did, I'm like, holy shit. This guy turned Superman into a porn star for a week with a new god. Like, damn, that's kinky.
There is actually our very first subscriber exclusive on the site, and it's the very first part of a regular series called The Many Armors of Iron Man. This debut entry looks at models 1 to 3, so the very first Iron Man costumes, and that includes the gold version as well, so it's kind of 1.5 in there. So it breaks down some of the key appearances of those suits, including some of the crossovers that will be related to them, and I'll be adding some of those crossovers as well as that series continues. There will be at least one other stream running alongside this, so it won't just be this Iron Man feature. There'll be other features running in there as well. So if you want to support the Omniverse, jump on and you'll get that feature and more as we go on. Recently added the Batman Contagion storyline. The seeds in this story start to build towards No Man's Land. So Wraith War, which is a ROM event. So ROM is coming back to Marvel in omnibus format at the very least. I think Volume 1 is due at either the end of this year or the start of next year. Volume 2 is definitely next year. And Volume 3 hasn't been announced yet. But even though they haven't really been in print for a long time, those stories still impact the Marvel Universe. It's a pretty big event. And some of it runs like alongside Secret Wars. So if people are going like, where are the heroes? What happened on Earth during the Secret Wars? Some of it is addressed in this storyline. And also bringing the Dawn of DC Superman to life. There's an interview with Jamal Campbell and Janoy Lindsay from Mr. Eric Antonai live at Fan Expo Canada. I don't want to spoil any of it, but they're talking about the influence of the 90s Superman animated series on this run, which gets me really excited.
Omniversecomics.guide. That's the spot for all your good comic book reading orders, reading lists, reviews, podcasts. Shall we continue?
Let's do it. I want to know what you've got for your number 3, dude.
I'm going to represent DC.
Thank you.
John Byrne crossed over
because I failed
in the
there
80s,
dismally.
and he went. I could have done just John Byrne at DC myself. I'm going to go with this one. I guess it's just one of those things you do in DC post-crisis where if you're going to get everybody together, it's got to involve the new gods. It's got to be something big. And this was a nice crossover that was crossing over into the Superman titles at the time. And I think line-wide, there was quite a number of books that were tying into this event. Yeah. But this is 6 issues from John Ostrander and John Byrne on pencils. I don't know how much influence Byrne had on the story, because I know that this is early Ostrander kind of sinking his teeth into something a little more meaty. He would go on to do great runs of Suicide Squad and Martian Manhunter, Spectre, et cetera. But in this series, it's a fun little, it's almost like a cult story, right?
Yeah.
The new gods come down to Earth, and there's a guy who's an influential, somewhat politician, cult leader that the superheroes have to stop.
Yeah.
I guess that's the small premise of it.
Pretty much. The reading order for this event is on the Omniverse Comics guide, omniversecomics.guide.
You don't say.
Say. Yeah, you can find it on there, and it explains what's happening with the Justice League. They do appear in the first issue and a bit of the second briefly, but their story is kind of told somewhere else. But this is all about the setup for introducing what will become Justice League International and the Suicide Squad. So this story is very much engineered towards kind of bringing those characters in and establishing them as part of the new continuity. Even though the Justice League series the continuity didn't stop after Crisis, it just carried on into this. So that's where that shift was a little on the messy side. So you kind of have to pick. We're like, I'm going to draw the line like here, I think. And that's what I've had to do during reading.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't so in my head when I see Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Justice League.
Yeah.
Not in this book. Different Justice League.
Yeah,
Really
that
good
was the
one, but
Detroit
different.
era Justice League. That's what it was, yeah.
Yes, you're right. They actually have a splash page as well.
They do. Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's a double
Good call.
splash.
Yeah.
I think Marvel Man ran
Double
it on his
splash.
page a little while ago, and it made me go like, I love that splash page. Legends to me feels, and this is the way I like to think of it, it feels to me in a lot of ways like an animated series. It feels a little toned down. The premise is quite simple. It's a little silly.
Yes.
That's what I quite like about Legends. There's something quite sweet about it. It is a bit weird that Darkseid's going, the problem is these heroes, we're not in that accent. The problem is these heroes, pranksters, and he's talking about them as if they've been a long-running issue. But this is post-crisis. Superman's not been around very long. Batman's not been around very so it makes that a little messy. Although, obviously, judging by not referring back too much again to that Batman reading order, but I think a few years have passed since their debut. So I think that the idea is they've been around for about 5 years at this point, much the way that New 52 was, which was I found a bit weird when people were complaining about the New 52. Going, how could they've been around for 5 years already? What the hell? Like, but they did this before. Anyway, people have to complain.
You're right. Yeah, it's true when you bring that up. But the Byrne art in this is top-notch DC quality, right? Yeah, that's DC Universe Legends.
That's fun. Yeah, I like it. Nice. So I have chosen some
X-Men.
X-Men.
The same.
I've chosen quite a lengthy run for a storyline, and part of the reason why I've chosen it is because this ticks every Byrne box. Every Byrne box. All the stuff we're talking about in terms of continuity, just the drama in these pages, the history, all this stuff. This is perfect. So this is from X-Men 111 all the way up to X-Men 121. This is a storyline where they meet Arcade, they face Magneto, and then it's like a massive climactic battle in a volcano, and then it looks as if the X-Men are dead, and Professor X and Phoenix believe the X-Men are dead. Alpha Flight are introduced in these issues. So you get the second major battle with Magneto. Hints in that storyline about his connection to the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, which we mentioned last week. So it kind of overlaps with Knights of Wundagore, I think, if I remember rightly. So if you read both together,
we talked
you're
about
going
that
like,
last week.
"Ooh, yeah, that does tie in." It's part of that whole overlap. You get that. You get Savage Land stuff with Sauron, plus loads of X-Men in rags, because that's what you have to do. That's like the sexy side of X-Men starts to come in. And you got the Shadow King being introduced, and that whole Professor X having a past. Sunfire comes back. Alpha Flight are introduced. This is big.
And we haven't even gotten to Proteus.
Not even touching Proteus, not Dark Phoenix.
Hellfire Club. Have we gotten Hellfire Club yet?
Nope.
No. Dark Phoenix. Days of Future Past.
Well,
all
technically,
after this.
Phoenix is introduced in 101.
Yeah, but not the Dark.
But the Dark Phoenix bit
villainous.
doesn't start to come until like another 10 issues away, or like, well, 8 issues away.
In and about. Yeah. What a time. What a time for comic books.
It's a great run. But go back. I mean, even if you don't want to do Giant Size X-Men and that kind of period where it's still a little rough around the edges, at least jump on.
Start here.
Like, I mean, I would go 101, but Byrne comes on, I think, it was issue 108.
108?
Yeah, 108.
Yeah.
And then this storyline is 111. So, I mean, just jump back a little bit. Read the Shi'ar storyline. And then you get the Magneto storyline. And then it just goes from there. And it's a relentless epic. And these two do the relentless epic so well.
Yeah. It's a shame it didn't go for longer, but maybe that's what makes it so good, is that it stayed.
Yeah.
It ended at peak.
Yes.
I think that's why people have such a fondness for it. Stays in it's amber, right? This one stays in amber.
Always leave them wanting more.
One of those ones.
That's what I do.
Right. Nice. Let's get into another. That face. John Byrne. It goes without saying that he is an incredible writer of team books, right? I think, or working on, whether he's drawing or whatever the case may be. X-Men, Fantastic Four. So I feel like it's only appropriate for a number 4 pick. I'm going to go obvious, but Marvel Avengers.
I'm so glad you did.
Yeah. it's a lot of his West Coast Avengers stuff, and the main story that I'm going to refer to is Darker Than Scarlet stuff, which
Yeah.
I feel is extremely impactful on the culture and mythology of Avengers, even till now. With what we're getting in multimedia, a lot of it comes from what he does with Scarlet Witch in these issues. It's just another testament to his ability to change the characters he's working with with different types of rules and familial dynamics.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's very much soap opera. He's doing the writing and the drawing, the heavy lifting, taking chances, being very risque. I mean, clearly between his Big Barda,
Yeah.
and now you go back to Scarlet Witch, you could see that John Byrne taps into a couple of very fetishy moments in his comics.
Which he
Red
completely
Sonja.
denies.
Yeah, right.
Like, come
I
on,
know,
Johnny.
like he denies it, but give me a break. Anywho, beyond the risque stuff, it's a pretty scary and dark story, just like the title says. Like you realize, like, man, if some of these characters do go bad, they'd be more terrifying than the villains.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
And Wanda Maximoff is definitely one of them.
And she looks so
highest
cool.
recommendation.
I love his redesign. I love that outfit.
She does. You believe that, it's like, oh, you are bad.
Yeah.
I believe it. It's like, and again, this is an interesting time of the Avengers because they're split in two teams. I'm not sure, were the Avengers that much of a seller at that time for them to be able to split the team up, or was it just a way to get the most out of these characters? I'd be interested to find that out.
Apparently in the 70s, the biggest Marvel team book was Avengers, not X-Men. I think X-Men did come up and overtook, but it was Avengers. And that's what Defenders was. Defenders was riding on the coattails of Avengers' popularity. Let's put some of our other big names into a team book. And then they did it again with the Champions, but the Champions didn't last. They weren't the biggest names. It was like Ghost Rider, Iceman, Hercules. Like, this is a weird team. Why? But I love that stuff. And Byrne worked on that as well. He did some issues of the Champions right at the end. And they're really nice looking comics. But yeah, it was that superstar, that all-star team dynamic thing was the big seller. And I think it was still there by the 80s because it was when Stern was on Avengers and he introduces, around about 1984, he introduces the concept of the West Coast Avengers and gets Hawkeye starting that team up. So I think there seemed to be a market for it there. And that kind of spins out a little bit out of Secret Wars and Wraith War, funnily enough, going back to that. And then they did the miniseries, as a tester, and it sold really well. And then they launched it, but they had Al Milgrom on the artwork, though. And I think Stern was supposed to write... I know. Sorry, Al. Apparently he's a lovely guy, but I'm not a fan of his art. Roger Stern was supposed to write the ongoing series, but he didn't. They picked someone else. And I can't think who it was. Did Al write it?
It was Englehart, yeah.
Yeah. But
he started.
It went for about like 40-something issues, and it just was the poor cousin, let's be honest, of Avengers at that time. Especially when you had Stern and John Buscema on the other books, and it wasn't as strong. But then they brought John Byrne on. He took both titles over. He wrote Avengers, and Paul Ryan was drawing it, whereas he decided to draw Avengers West Coast, which he changed it from West Coast Avengers to Avengers West Coast while he was on it.
And in some ways, it's the better team.
The better book.
It's just it's a better book.
Yeah,
it's good.
By
it's
far.
Good stuff.
And a lot of it is very emotional, and because it's like the love triangle elements with Wonder Man, and he starts to play with some of those elements of the story, and it's not what you expect of a superhero title. It's got it's a bit of an element of cheese in there. There's some crazy stuff going on.
There
with
has
Wonder,
to be,
but it's just I love those books. But when I started reading American comics and buying American comics instead of UK reprints, Byrne was writing and drawing Avengers at this point in time. So these were the comics I first got into properly as a kid. So they've got like a special place in my heart.
Yeah, that's great stuff. All right, rounding it off, your number 5.
Oh my God, we're here. Number 5. This is where I picked my random one. Okay, so it is Fantastic Four related, but it's an alternate universe. So it's What If number 36. That's series 1, volume 1, number 36.
Oh.
The main story is what if the Fantastic Four had not gained their superpowers. So when they return from space, they're just adventurers. So it's kind of like a Challenges of the Unknown thing, which was always the vibe they ripped off anyway, let's be honest. But wasn't Kirby,
sure.
didn't Kirby did he co-create the Challenges of the Unknown? He definitely worked on that title, but I don't know
I think so.
how much of a hand he had in their creation. Still, it's...
Should look that up while I'm here.
Yeah, there you go. Lovely, thank you. Yes, the team come back and they do exactly what they did, facing the Mole Man and the giant creature coming out of the ground. It's Giganto, isn't it? I had to double check that. Couldn't remember for a minute.
He did create the Challengers of the Unknown.
And the Fantastic Four. You can see that connection right there. You know, it's a very similar set of people.
100%.
Yeah.
With Joe Simon.
That's it.
Possibly with Joe Simon or Dave Wood, but it was created by Jack Kirby.
Okay, lovely. Cheers, dude. It's kind of an amalgam of that take, and it may well be a reference to both. But it's an alternate universe, done in one story, written and drawn by John Byrne. And it's a very different take on the FF. But it's still, because even though it's What If, and sometimes that can feel a bit disposable, it's Byrne on What If. Like, get it, pick it up. Can't go wrong. I think it's also collected in Omnibus Volume 2. I don't have my spectacles.
Oh, you got both volumes.
Oh, God, yeah.
Uh-oh. Oh, yeah, I have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Duh.
Okay, George. Yeah, it's in Volume 2, so it's a good fun book.
Good pick.
Thank you.
But I like that some of our stuff is a little bit more off of the beaten path, but I guess that's because of what we've read and not read, at least for myself. But it's cool to see some of these other options that people can... You got the beginner fan and you got the deep cut fan.
Yeah.
This list kind of caters to both. I saved my 5 for what would probably be my favorite stuff of John Byrne, strictly for nostalgia and when I fell in love with comics. And it's pretty much collected all in this hardcover. Man of Steel, Volume 4.
Oh, it's 4, yeah.
It's the end of the run, but it's got my favorite childhood comics in it. All in this collection. The Supergirl saga, that first issue of when he finally encounters, and this isn't his cousin, Kara Zor-El. This is the Matrix Supergirl.
Yes.
That, I don't know what, she turns into Linda Danvers later down the line when Peter David takes over, but she is the Supergirl of this post-crisis universe. And throughout Byrne's run, he drops little first appearances of her trying to find Clark Kent, her trying to track down Superman. And you're just trying to figure out who is this? How do they connect? When is she going to find them? What's this side plot that he's telling? Part 1 of Supergirl Saga that I just was so fond of as a kid. That's the cover. Why is Superman terrified? I'm 4 years old. I want to know what scares him so much. Why is Supergirl beating him up? What's the deal? She's been in these books looking for him, and is it just to kick his butt? Then you realize that Supergirl, not to spoil it, but because she's not Kryptonian, she really gets to mess around with Superman's psyche. Like, what the hell? Who the hell are you? So it's all strictly nostalgia for me. This is my if the house is burning down, take this book with me. Because it's the comfort. This is the comfort of what I love about these books, right? Yeah. So I think I still have my original issues from little guy. Yeah. I
bet they're ruined.
So ruined, stapled together, you name it. But within that collection, there's the 600 issue where him and George Perez do a Superman Wonder Woman team up against the New Gods or Darkseid,
which is a follow-on from Legends
or looked at. Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't read these comics as much as I looked at them forever. Yeah. These were the books that I could always they were like my toys in a way, right? If I had my toy, I'd follow what was going on in the book. So later growing up and realizing like, oh, this guy, he did the X-Men too. And he did that too. Like, oh, no wonder I liked it, because he was, the best at the time in my head. And so John Byrne's Superman for me is kind of like my home base. I know for some people they're like, no, he ruined Superman. But for me, it's what I grew up kind of. I always appreciated the family that he kept for Superman. Instead of making him like all alone completely. He had a home to go back to. He had
Yeah.
friends and family that he felt that grounded him,
The
and I
grounding is
really
really
appreciated that.
important to that character.
I Yeah, and I'll always be grateful to the Byrne run for grounding Superman. But this is one where the ramifications of Superman's choices and how he deals with things carry on for a couple years.
Yeah.
So Superman Man of Steel collection, if you could get your hands on that stuff from John Byrne. I don't know why they didn't make it an omnibus,
I think they
to be
will,
quite honest. Two omnibus.
because they
They
do
have
that.
to.
They do
But
that.
this was the closest. Yeah.
Bastards.
Yeah. This is the closest they've come to it. And it's a nice little set. It kind of became that that baseline for the years to come. Like even for the animated series that you had brought up, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that grounding of what the animated series was is more based, I think, on the foundation that Byrne established
Yeah,
with
you could well be
Superman.
right.
He didn't, it was a little more of that than the Silver Age. But anyways, very fond of it. Love John Byrne's Superman. I'll leave it there. That's my number 5.
Excellent. Excellent choice. I've only reread the volume 1 recently, and I need to pick up the rest because I started doing a Superman post-crisis
Reading order.
Yeah. What are the chances? And I will finish it, but yeah, I want to focus on the Byrne just because I just like it. It's just upbeat comics. So I asked a question in the chat about people's favorite single issues or Byrne stories. Omega Bread has said about the Batman Captain America one shot, which is just a fun romp, and the Hulk story where he fights Doc Samson, and the splash page where he uppercuts the Hulk is simply gorgeous, and it really is. I love that. I bought that it was a reprint that just ran that story, and I remember that because I think that I don't really want to spoil it too much, but yeah, it's a fun story, but you see a lot of his major villains, and it's Doc Samson taking on the Hulk, and it's very Byrne. And the splash is amazing. He's absolutely right.
To Omega Bread and his comment about the Captain America Batman,
Have you read
in
it?
that panel I was in, Byrne said that I think that might have been his favorite thing he's ever worked on.
Right. Interesting.
Heard that.
Because I had one last question. That's for you, which is,
okay,
is there a John Byrne book or series or single story or whatever it might be that you desperately want to read?
Ooh, okay, can I list 2?
Yeah, go on. I'll let you.
I got Alpha Flight, which is going to be coming out in October.
Yeah.
And Fantastic Four.
Lovely.
I desperately want to have those on my list checked off.
Yeah.
That I've read that in my life. And I've read chunks of Fantastic Four, so I know that it's definitely what people say it is. I haven't touched Alpha Flight at all. So that'll be completely blind, going in blind, knowing that it's associated with the X-Men and Wolverine and things like that. But
I heard him say his favourite work was his OMAC miniseries. And it looks very serious, but I really, really wanted to give it a go. And if I'm picking some of his other bits, his Dark Side Galactus crossover thing, I want to read. Again, I've only flicked through it. I've never read it. I want to read his Next Men. I've never read any of it at all. And I've just one more.
Yeah, me neither.
His two issues.
No. Cheater.
Massive cheater. His 2 issues of Further Adventures of Indiana Jones, the first 2 issues of that series. I've never read them. And I love Indiana Jones, like, so much. So, and it's Byrne on Indie. Like, come on.
Plenty of stuff that we didn't even get into that definitely check out the career of this artist, writer extraordinaire. Like, controversial character, you name it, but the art and the work is, the proof is in the pudding.
It is.
Love me some John Byrne.
Love me some pudding.
And don't let your kids read the Superman Big Barda issue.
Let them understand the real world. It was Comics Code approved. It's absolutely fine.
Crazy. That's so crazy. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and hanging out with us this morning, this evening, this afternoon, whenever it is that you're tuning in all over the world. We appreciate it. If you're on Twitch and it's your first time finding us, press that subscribe, follow button, share it, and do the same on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. But go to the Omniverse comic.guide. That's where everything is found, available, and it's your best option. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much to everybody who tunes in every week. Dave, I'll see you next week.
At ease, soldier.
Let's do it. All right, everybody. Take care. We'll be back.